Assalamualaikum. Welcome to our program on Indonesian foreign policy. Our topic today is on the Indonesian foreign policy under President Joko Widodo. And we will discuss President Joko Widodo period since 2014 until 2024. For the first section, I will explore President Joko Widodo policy in the first period, in 2014 until 2019. Yeah, as a general phenomena in presidency, if you compare the US administration, for example, in the first presidency period, generally a leader make more conservative policy because it is too dangerous to take radical policy in the first period, because it is very rich. Maybe there are many controversial, there are many rejection from the society. So in the next general election, it is hard to maintain their power and as an ammunition for the opposition. So in the first period, really more moderate. I will say that in the first period of President Joko Widodo presidency, in a first half time, still conceptualizing the Indonesian foreign policy. And the form of the foreign policy we can see in the second half period in the first presidency. So what President Jokowi stated in front of the UN or in front of the ASEAN meeting and in front of the House, really more normative statement. For example, what President Jokowi stated in front of the House. President Jokowi said that Indonesia's foreign policy is to make friends with the state which provide great benefit to the people. The principle of free and active that has been adopted has not been abandoned. To make friends with all countries, the maximum benefit must be felt by the people. Do not have many friends but suffer losses. This last sentence really was a criticism because the prior president, President SBY, and the end of President SBY period, there is strong criticism that Indonesian foreign policy more beneficial for foreigner. For example, how easy foreign aid come to Indonesia and how easy foreigner to get opportunity or job in Indonesia with high salary, higher than generally Indonesian people salary. So this is a really criticism, but stated in a natural voice. But really this is as a critic to President SBY. And what stated by the Ambassador Rizal Sukma, yeah, before as Ambassador, Rizal Sukma is a scientist in Indonesian Science Institute and a researcher, a professor research in international relations. Professor Rizal Sukma, Ambassador Rizal Sukma, tried to summarize what President Jokowi won in Indonesian foreign policy. Professor Rizal Sukma, or Ambassador Rizal Sukma today, stated that is it real or hallucination about the maritime axis doctrine, or next conceptualized as a maritime diplomacy? In a long discussion, Ambassador Rizal Sukma make a strong statement and message that President Jokowi take his own way in diplomacy. What we call it as maritime diplomacy, as a part of economic diplomacy. So more specific, from President Jokowi, we face the ocean as a potential sources for our development. So we will make a strong diplomacy on maritime. Yeah, this is the maritime concept under President Jokowi. And related to other country, President Jokowi will push the maritime diplomacy. The 5 concept on maritime, firstly about the maritime culture, secondly about the sovereignty on food from the ocean, and infrastructure, connectivity in the ocean, and maritime diplomacy, and also increase the power, military power in the ocean to guard our very long line border in the ocean. Indonesia, more than 70% of the territory are ocean. So it is important for us to make more concern about the ocean. Yeah, this is what President Joko Widodo stated in UN General Assembly. He said that I want to emphasize that in my government, Indonesia as a 3rd largest country with the largest Muslim population in the world, as the largest country in Southeast Asia, will continue to carry out a free, independent, and active foreign policy, which is defined for the national interest and to create world order based on freedom, lasting peace, and social justice. So it is still normative, but this message echo from as President SBY. What I mean is how President Jokowi tried to make soft diplomacy, continue soft diplomacy, and introduce Indonesia in front of the world leader that Indonesia is a Muslim majority in moderate style. So Indonesia was a moderate Muslim. It is very different from the other part, for example, in Africa or in Middle East, that there are many terrorism and so on and so on. So President Joko Widodo continue this message to inform the world that Indonesia majority Muslim, and this is the moderate Muslim, and don't worry about our religion. The message is like this. So if you come to Indonesia, it is in peaceful, a good relation. You can invest many things in Indonesia. We can create many cooperation. There is no extremism as mainstream or society mainstream, but generally we are moderate. This is a strong message to the world. And in practice or practically, this is our first Minister of Foreign Affairs, first woman as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Retno Marsudi. She tried to practice the values message by President Joko Widodo to daily activism in foreign policy. She tries to bring back the state to protect the nation and provide a sense of security to all citizens through the implementation of a free and active foreign policy. Yeah, this is more measurable statement, not too normative. And what did by Bu Retno Marsudi in the first period tried to establish more services for Indonesian citizens in other country. So if we go to everywhere, we easy to touch the Indonesian government there. We easy to get the service from the government. So this is significant change because many services from foreign department for Indonesian people in other country. Now, so in the first period, we can summarize that President Joko Widodo still conceptualizing the Indonesian foreign policy, but in the second period, it is more practical. We can compare and trace this kind of foreign policy. There are several priorities in Indonesian foreign policy under the second period of President Joko Widodo. And there is national and international context surrounding these priorities. What is the context? Firstly, the security, stability, and economic growth of the Republic of Indonesia are maintained amidst political turmoil and global trade market more than 5% per year for a long time. Since President SBY until the first period of President Joko Widodo, our economic development more than 5% per year. Now, absolutely, it is before the COVID pandemic. So this statement in the new year, 2020. 2020. Okay. Secondly, the domestic market optimism that continues to grow so that Republic of Indonesia become indispensable in the global geoeconomy. This is our optimism. This is optimistic perspective that Indonesia will develop their economic power to face our future and still in high rate growth. This is our optimism before pandemic. Okay, we all before pandemic. And related to international context, Indonesia also makes target to increase the purchasing parity power. Indonesia targets as the big five in 2030. What is purchasing parity power? Why not income per capita? It is very different. Income per capita, it is very relative, related to what the how people can fulfill their need in a country. So different country, different need, different price. So we used purchasing parity power. What is purchasing parity power? Purchasing parity power the power of $1 to fulfill our need daily. For example, we have $10. Okay, $10. In Indonesia, $10 is about 150,000 rupees. $10. It is enough to fulfill a basic need, yeah, food, for example, for 3 days. Because in many regional salary in Indonesia, yeah, it's about 1.5 million per month. So per day, it is enough to fulfill our food in 50,000 rupees. So $10, you can fulfill your food basic need for 3 days in Indonesia. $10. But if you purchase $10 in Singapore, maybe only one-time breakfast with a light street cafe, maybe, yeah. Yeah, you can make example. For example, you go to Orchard Road, you buy the chicken in Orchard Road in the morning, nasi lemak, and street cafe, yeah, just light cafe, yeah. It is about $10 US dollar. So in Singapore only one breakfast, but in Indonesia 3 days. Now this is purchasing parity power. So maybe your income per capita higher than Indonesia, but if you pay something or buy something in Indonesia, although the income per capita lower than your country, maybe you can fulfill more need in Indonesia with a small dollar than you get in your country. So Indonesia want to increase this purchasing parity power. That is why we don't use income per capita, because of the relativity of money purchasing. Okay, what is the Indonesian foreign policy priorities in 2019 until 2024 under President Jokowi? Firstly, strengthening economic diplomacy, diplomacy and economy. Protection diplomacy, how to protect Indonesian people, another country. Because we have many migrants around the world, and generally or majority blue collar, not white collar. Yeah, this is the reality. Many Indonesian people go to Saudi Arabia, go to Malaysia, yeah, as blue collar. Yeah. And we should protect them because generally low education, low educated person. Yeah. Okay. And number 3, diplomacy of sovereignty. How to protect our territory. How to maintain our sovereignty. because there are many political movement in Indonesian territory, yeah, such as in Papua, that try to to go out from Indonesia. And also there are many foreign challenge to maybe to invade or have annexation to Indonesia. Yeah, maybe it is possible. So we need to protect our sovereignty. And number 4, increase Indonesia's contribution and leadership in the region and the world under the intermestic calculation. Intermestic means international domestic consideration. So what we do in another country, really there is a linkage between domestic and international consideration or calculation. Okay, strengthening economic diplomacy, protection diplomacy. I want to focus in priorities number 3 and 4. Priority number 3 about the sovereignty diplomacy. The message Indonesian sovereignty is not negotiable. The resolution of Republic of Indonesia state boundaries was intensified. So negotiation, resolution, solution on outstanding border problem. Yeah, in northern Kalimantan, there are 3 or 4 outstanding border problem. We will intensify the to get solution between us. And cooperation to spread tolerance, pluralism, democracy as the national identity will continue to be intensified. On the other hand, cooperation against radicalism and terrorism will also be strengthened. Why? Yeah, this is the message in front of the UN General Assembly from President Joko Widodo that Indonesia is a moderate Muslim country. We love pluralism, democracy, tolerance, and there is no negotiation for radicalism and terrorism. So it is a strong message to international society that Indonesia different from other Islamic society or countries. What is the challenge in the third priority? Firstly, about the existence of United Liberation Movement for West Papua. This is separatism group. And today they get 6 Pacific countries support. Why diplomacy on sovereignty is very important? Because there is potential in our eastern region that this political movement tried to free from Indonesia, and it's supported by 6 Pacific countries. For example, PNG Prime Minister, the prior, Peter O'Neill, actively facilitate the formation of the United Liberation Movement Front for West Papua. So I see that there are many OPM in bahasa Indonesia, ULMWP, mean OPM, Organisasi Papua Merdeka. Many OPM leader stay in PNG and protected by the political leader there. So it is important for Republic of Indonesia to maintain their territory and sovereignty. How dangerous Papua movement. It is very dangerous. Why? Because under international indigenous perspective, there are many discussion on how indigenous race and people to get their self-determination, to be free from the other identity. So today, there are strong political support from Pacific and African countries. More than 79 countries support Papua to get self-determination or referendum. And if it happened, it means Papua will free from Indonesia to be an independent country. I see that the relation between the Papuan elite today and the neighboring country such as PNG, political elite, very close relation, very close. In the picture, you can see that this is the governor of Papua in the center. Go to PNG to celebrate Independence Day and met supporter leader from for separatism in Papua. So you can imagine, former leader come to the other country to celebrate the Independence Day and meet to the supporters of separatism leader. So this Governor Papua meet to several governor in PNG and all of the governor and PNG support the Papua Merdeka or United Liberation Movement for West Papua. So they support separatism, and the governor of Papua meet all these leaders in PNG. And all of the governors in PNG, together with the people of PNG, join in very big, massive demonstration in Port Moresby on September 10, 2009 to support the Papua to get independent. And what happened in January 31, 2019, all of the governors in PNG join in the press conference, and this press conference published declaration of war from ULMWP or United Liberation Movement for West Papua, declare war on Indonesian government. So you can imagine, political elite formerly in PNG joined to the separatism leader in PNG in Port Moresby, declare war on Indonesian government. So it is not a simple relation, I see. It is very close. That is why Indonesian government try to protect their sovereignty seriously. Several months ago, I discussed with Professor Bilfer Singh, and he showed me the many pictures. He stated that the actual OPM or United Liberation Movement for West Papua leader is not in Papua land, but in PNG. They are protected by the government and the society, and well trained in military in Congo. So military movement, there are many wing, political wing, democratic wing, and army wing or military wing of OPM, well trained in Congo. And yeah, Professor Bill Fersing also had many picture about the meeting of the Papuan cabinet, who is the prime minister, who is the leader, and I see all these picture, and I believe that the establishment of Papua independent prepared seriously, not only by the people of Papuan, but also by international organization link. Both consists of state. There are 6 states recognized Papua as independent, and 79 African Pacific support the Papuan for self-determination, and also the international non-government organization or NGO. So there are many actors to design Papua to be an independent country. So that is why Indonesian government tried to protect this territory from secessionism. Okay, it is a very serious problem for Indonesia. This is the first challenge in diplomacy on sovereignty. What is the second challenge? In my opinion, it is about radicalism and terrorism problem. Convince the international community that Indonesia is a tolerant country, respect multiculturalism and democratic amidst the frequent issues of radicalism and terrorism in Indonesia. And you can see the fact that the leader of terrorists in Indonesia really not Indonesian citizen holder. You remember about Nurdin and Top. You remember about the Dr. Azahari. All, all Malaysian people. But come to Indonesia, organized terrorists, some action in Indonesia. I also wonder, why not in Malay, but in Indonesia? So, yeah, this is our problem because, yeah, factually, there are several society group that support terrorism or the idea of terrorism in Indonesia. And we should face it, or we should de-radicalize this with a comprehensive program, not only about ideological oriented, but also about the economy. There is a close linkage between ideology and economy because this is the practice in the society, not in front of the theoretical narrative or discussion, but this is the real life. So ideology and economy really have a strong relation. Okay, so the problem is there is imported terrorists from other country come to Indonesia, and there is supporter also inside the society in Indonesia. So we need more campaigns on de-radicalism program comprehensively. Okay. Priority number 4 about the increased Indonesian contribution and leadership in the region and the world. Really, there are many agenda in second period of President Joko Widodo. Firstly, Republic of Indonesia is a member of the United Nations Security Council since January 2019 to 30 December 2020. With the main agenda about the countering terrorism. Indonesia also as chairman of the United UNSC in May 2019. Okay, so counter-terrorism is Indonesian agenda in UN. Secondly, Indonesian position in UN Human Rights Council in 2020 until 2022. Also, Indonesian position as a chairman of the Foreign Policy and Global Health in 2020. Indonesian position as chair of ASEAN in 2023. And Republic of Indonesia become a chair of the G20 in 2020. So Indonesian foreign policy in the second period of President Jokowi will increase Indonesian leader in international fora. But ASEAN will continue to be the pillar of Indonesian foreign policy. Yeah, you remember about the concentric circle. The first circle is ASEAN. The second circle about the Pacific and Eastern Asia, and the third circle about the globe politics. So global politics as a third ring, but it is also important. Okay, what is the challenge on priority number 4? According to my opinion, firstly, optimizing the role of the Republic of Indonesia in the UNSC in the case of Palestine and Israel. I see that there is a different discourse among the Indonesian political elite in the government and Indonesian political elite in the society. Indonesian political elite in the society refer to Islamic society. If they discuss on the relation between Palestine and Israel, absolutely they push Indonesia to be a leader or to be a mediator in peace agreement between Israel and Palestine. But I do believe that Indonesian political elite in the government, especially in Indonesian foreign policy, realize that it is almost impossible Indonesia to become mediator. Why? Because under international law, if a country wants to be a mediator, he should get the position balance among the parties. Indonesian position is not balanced. Under international law, if you want to be mediator or as the third parties, it means that you have a balanced relation. Indonesian relation to Palestine and Israel is unbalanced relation. Indonesia recognized Palestine as a independent government or state, and we have a formal diplomacy. But to Israel, we don't have a formally a relation, an ambassador. So this unbalanced position make Indonesia is very difficult, and it is impossible. In my opinion, it is impossible for Indonesia to be mediator because under international law, Indonesia doesn't fulfill the characteristic of mediator under international law. There are several criteria to be a mediator, and Indonesia not fulfill one of the criteria. What? The balanced relation among the parties. But if we see the discourse in the society, especially in the Muslim society, Indonesian push to be a leader in this peace agreement, but internationally, in international norm, it is impossible. And secondly, the challenge is based on my opinion about the continuation of the role of Indonesian diplomacy in the case of Rakhine State or Rohingya. The Republic of Indonesia, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has been all out in diplomacy and providing humanitarian assistance to the Rakhine people. But it is difficult to find ASEAN partners who are as persistent as Indonesia, because they are hiding behind the ASEAN Charter on no intervention values in domestic matter. Republic Indonesia is included in the humanitarian aid clause because what Indonesia or the people of Indonesia do in Rakhine State is not on behalf of the government or the state, because in ASEAN there is non-state intervention among the neighbor. What Indonesia or Indonesian people do in Rakhine really non-governmental action. That is why many Islamic organizations as Muhammadiyah, NU, and other Islamic organizations joined together to create humanitarian aid and serve the Rakhine state people and enter the Rakhine territory. Why? Because it is people-to-people diplomacy, not state-to-state. This is the different term in international law. So, okay, because of humanitarian reason, the people of Indonesia come to Rakhine State region to help the other people in other country. So it is under humanitarian norm. Yeah, there are many activists from Indonesia. There is in the picture you can see this is Bu Rahma. Yeah, Bu Rahmawati is UMJ lecturer as chairman in this humanitarian action, and also there are many doctors from Faculty of Medicine, University Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta, also join in this mission. So the message is the people serve the other people, not the state enter the other state, because it breaks in the ASEAN values. Okay, yeah. That is what I see as a challenges in the second period of President Joko Widodo. And I see that there are two things very important to have concern or focus for President Joko Widodo. Firstly, about the political dynamism in Papua, and the relationship between Papuan elite and political figures in PNG must be taken more seriously, because there is a huge potential for PNG political elite, such as Prime Minister or Minister of Foreign Affairs, to not speak honestly about their political attitude regarding the Papuan issues. I don't believe what they say. Yeah, because they make backstreet relation. And the second, Republic of Indonesia must be realistic in taking its role in Palestinian-Israel conflict, because the principle of two-state solution requires a principle of balance in international law. So it is, realizing this position, Republic of Indonesia should more realistic to take a role, and also the Muslim majority in Indonesia also should understand about what is the Indonesian position in front of the international law. Okay, thank you very much, and you can still make discussion after this class. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.